Thanks for being for this session, Industry Connect session. Let me introduce myself. I'm Gokul, part of EMBA. It's a 2014-15 year batch. So we are proudly launched an initiative called Industry Connect Club, where we connect with different leaders of the industry and share experience with the class, and also we have opened up with a wider audience recently. So today's topic is on designing user experience for global audience. When I say user experience, the first thing that comes to my mind is Apple products. Don't you agree? So Apple products has the best design, and it gives the in-depth experience that anyone will be looking for, and any product or organization will be looking for these kind of stuff. So with this note, I would like to mention Anjali Desai, who is been the director of Intune for user experience division, who is placed in US. So she has gracefully accepted our invitation and taken her personal time off and connecting with us. So I would like to welcome Anjali Desai. Please give a big round. She would like to share on the topic. And in between, we have opened the Twitter handle. This is the Twitter handle. You can post questions, and there will be a surprise gifts also for good and tough questions.
Thank you so much.
Thank you.
So let me get this. Is this working? All right, thanks for making time on a Sunday afternoon. I know you guys had a very invigorating class just before this UX class. Our teacher is here. And hoping the next hour will be as interesting, if not better. So today I'll take you through my personal journey, a couple of short stories on the design philosophy, and also my personal journey about design leadership as well as design philosophy, and then moving into globalization, internationalization, more so from design and experience. What does it mean and how to? So we'll be just touching the tip of the iceberg, 1 hour, getting a overall like, hey, what is this? And hopefully in the future we'll maybe able to interact more and get deeper into it. Let's see, is the clicker working? So leadership, many of you are, I guess everybody is in the MBA program, correct? No? So who all are in the MBA program? Can you? Okay, good. And the rest are students of design and experience or product management. Is that the crowd here? Yes. Yeah?
Product management, CUA.
What is CUA? Okay, good. Any other disciplines? Working professional. Working in which segment? IT? Okay. So hopefully I'll be able to touch some of the different areas too. The focus today will be on globalization and design, and also maybe a 15 or plus functions which interact with user experience design to make it a wholesome experience from user's point of view. So as you can see, you'll hear about my 4 B's about leadership, and then also what is my thinking about design, what drives good design, my philosophy, I'll share that with you, and globalization and UX. The case study you will, which we will touch today will be on PayPal.com, because I used to work at PayPal before Intuit. I joined Intuit last August, and 8.5 years at PayPal I was hired to lead their visual globalization team. So the journey became from having, I think when I joined in 2005, PayPal was only in 5 countries. 3 languages. When I left in 2013, we were in 192 countries and 23 plus languages. And to their credit, right to left, which was Hebrew, was one of the language sides, Israel side, where my team was leading the effort on making sure the right to left language and all the nuances were captured. So that's what we'll look at today. So leadership, everybody has their own mantras, their leader, coaches, mentors. So for me, 2 people do, they have influenced me a lot. One is Deepak Chopra, his book on leadership, where it talks about the soul of leadership, and also Stuart Friedman, because what has helped me is understanding not just being a leader, being a good design leader. So there are subtleties in that, because being a good design leader, designers, as you might have noticed, or being one yourself, are pretty emotional, because we have to be emotional to connect with our audience. So to have that sensitivity to lead a team of designers is very different than leading a team of engineers or product managers. So with my 18 plus years of experience, something's evolved in this whole journey. It was, how do you retain good talent? What are the leadership qualities which take you there? And how do you grow them? Growing designers as design managers, or growing them as design leaders. So, this is where I started leaning more to what is it that looking and listening. Not just in leadership, you need that in design too. Emotional bonding, because you have to have that with your team, as well as if you switch the roles, you have to have that emotional bonding with your users. You need to understand who your users are. You have to walk in their shoes. You have to put yourself through that experience so you can deliver the optimal experience. And we did touch, why is Apple so great? Because they think for you before even you start thinking what you need. So if we can be proactive in that way, so the emotional engagement, the bonding comes into play, and doing. Do what your users do. You cannot just read in books about experience and designing products and not having use the product. You will never know what the user has done to reach where his journey is, whether it's a great journey, aha moment, or it is like a drop-off point where he says, oh, I'm abandoning this whole experience. So that's where I started thinking, how is this balance? And this was something I started poking on my flight in, because there's a lot of stuff between leadership with your team and the same qualities leading to with the relationship with your users. So being aware of who you are, and then as a company or a design team, who are we and who are we delivering to? That awareness is very critical, because that leads you to have the question, why am I doing what am I doing? Why am I designing this? You're designing a prototype. Are you solving one person's problem or many people's? Or is it something nobody knows it's a problem? So that why, question of why. And the authentic, especially within global design, being authentic becomes very critical. Many a times we all have seen, there are sites like designers in US are sitting and designing, and then they just put, it comes to India, they put a face of an Indian, and everything else is US-centric. This is how things were done because of time to market, cost effectiveness, and all that. So for a user in India using that website, it did not feel authentic at all. They could not connect, which was very real, because there's nothing in it for me. Somebody else didn't even think about me. So being authentic, that becomes important. Responsible. We are responsible for making sure our users are successful. It's in our hands as technology leaders, as experienced leaders, as designers, content writers, and we have to think for them. And that's a huge responsibility, because the success of the company is in our hands. If we do not deliver a good design or an experience, then the success of the product fails. Like the whole concept leading to success is taking a downturn. So that responsibility, we have to take it seriously. This is a profession. I mean, design is no longer a fine art school, like you paint, you sit. It's very deep thinking and logic evolve business. So take that responsibility seriously. That's something it comes up. And be innovative. Yes, we have to have great products. Innovation is important. So as designers, keeping in par with what's happening in the industry, design trends, picking up with that, not just in design but also technology. As designers, we need to understand what are the cutting edge technology, and it's vice versa for technologists as well as product managers, because great ideas can come from anywhere. So it's not saying that, hey, I'm a designer, that's why I know the best. We have to go beyond that. We have to embrace an agile culture, like all of us sitting at the table. What is the best solution? We need to start thinking on that terms. And innovation in leadership. So this was something I really focused very seriously on. I put a lot of emphasis on team management and one-on-ones. I do spend a lot of time with my team, making sure once a week at least I have half an hour or every other week an hour with the team. Why? Because you have to connect with your team at a human-to-human level, edge to edge. You need to value who they are, where they're coming from. They're not just, some badge number or some ID card number or anything like that. The more you invest in your team, all of us who have been in that setup or managers know that you get a lot more than you asked for. They'll be there sitting till midnight working for you, even though you might not have asked for. So a lot of innovation in how you manage that is one of the things which I have learned is going for your walks with your team members, like one-on-one. What happens is you get out of the office building, get out of the space, and start going outdoors, because there's a whole shift in the way you think. You're outdoors, it's open, and conversations are very organic. So it's not like sitting across from your table, hey, this is my boss, and there's a lot of title and all that, so you have to move away from that, because if you connect with your team at a human level, they will stay with you, they will go with you wherever you go, and you have loyalists. So the same way you have users. If you take care of your users in the right way, what happens is they stick to your brand. They will not go anywhere, come what may. So that is the type of effort and thinking we need to put into, like what is being innovation. So that's my interpretation, and it's open for a dialogue or conversation later on. But this is where I gravitate to. And my design philosophy. So Charles Ames, most of us know, a great architect, got into design, and this is one of the images which has stuck with me. It's the elephant chair he designed, I think it was late 1940s. It never went into mass production. But the whole concept of how he came to that was, it had to be delightful. The kid sitting on that need to be enjoying that experience. Had to be playful, yet it had meaning, it had purpose. So it was not designed for design's sake, there was a practical aspect. So in UX, everything has to have an ROI. Your business partners will say, hey, will we get 10% growth, or what's it? Conversion is going up or not? So start thinking as business people. So this is where, for me, what has happened is, if there is a purpose with what you do, and how you do it, bringing it together, then it becomes a real delightful, long-lasting relationship with the brand, with the person who you are. So this is my mantra for design and life. Keeping it very simple, elegant, no clutter, and then having that delightful experience and purposeful, has meaning. Everything has meaning. Thoughtful. So you have put a lot of effort into why. Even one pixel, you move from left to right, there is thinking going behind that. It's not just a random movement. So that's the philosophy. Moving on to the three images on the screen. So there's one on the left, the black one. Can anybody guess what it is? Yeah, well. And? Yeah, getting close. So that was a experience 2011. I'll talk to you guys about that. Any guesses on the middle image? Maybe when I blow it up, you get to see. So let me go, let me show you that as I get into this one. So Norfolk, California. So how this experience, 10-day experience, I went on a silent retreat for a Vipassana meditation. And no paper, being a designer it's very hard, no paper, no pencil, no nothing to write on. So you cannot read, you cannot look at anybody in the eyes. Anybody has done Vipassana here? Okay, so you guys know what I'm talking about. The first 3 days were the hardest. But as I got over the 4th day, then my kids and my husband, they said, oh, mommy will come back, she talks too much, she will not be able to keep the silence. But it's an exercise. So what that 10 days taught me was the decluttering, right? There's so much going on, the monkey mind. And how do you bring that into experience? It's the declutter the noise on the website or any design you do. So start moving things out so clarity crystallizes. So the 10-day, that was my big lesson. Declutter, keeping it very simple. The whole experience, the food, everything was so simple that it's easy to copy it and bring it on in other experiences, and it has a lot of meaning. That meaning still carries with you, like for me it's 3 years later, I still have it in my heart, like what it was. So that is the type of experiences we need to design and deliver to, so you touch people's soul in a way. This one, the sunflower field. Any guesses? Not the Yeah, there you go. Singapore Airport, and you see the tail of Singapore Airlines there. So with my PayPal job as heading Asia Pacific design, I had to travel to Singapore every 6 weeks. So Singapore Airport became my home, kind of. This was it's a year and a half back. After a long haul from San Francisco, I go to the terminal, I think it's Terminal 3. Glass doors, they just open up and out I walk, and that's what I saw. Sunflowers, and out of the blue, like you do not even expect it. So that is the type of aha, the delight we need to deliver with our experiences. Like the user doesn't even, he cannot even dream, like at an airport, 3rd floor, seeing live sunflowers. I mean, I was like totally spellbound, and it's hard to imagine such an experience where you can touch and feel things, and it's open air. After sitting 15 hours in a plane, you get this. It's like you're hooked. And for me, seriously, Singapore Airlines it is. Since my kids have been like 9 months, I've been traveling with them, and my older one is 22. So it's I'm a brand loyal to them because of these type of delights which they throw to you. So keep that coming with your experiences. And this particular chair which I talked about, the elephant chair, for me the simplicity, the lines, the clean lines, no extravagant, clutter there, delightful obviously, look at the child's face, and being, has a purpose, like, it's not just sitting there as a showpiece, there is a reason why it is there. So those were my 3 small stories for you, from leadership, design, and where I am, the philosophy part. Now looking at the design for globalization, we all need to wear global glasses. We sit in US, we design for India. India, we design for Europe. So we are designing for everybody, everywhere. It's pretty much world is flat, right? But in that flatness, we need to have the subtleties of what does each locale need, what does each country need, what does each segment need. So you can do it by studying about it, either being in the market or interacting with people from there. So the topics we'll cover, somebody will have to give me a time check, okay? The topics we'll cover is why? Why do we need to do that? Why globalize? Anybody have any thoughts on that? Why should we do it? Why can't we just design one experience and say, okay guys, take it?
The context and mental models are different for different people living in
you it, right? It has to have the differences in there. And then talking about globalization, internationalization, and localization, I'll touch on that. Also ecosystem from user experience, organization point of view, what does that mean? And then we'll do evaluation. How do you evaluate? What are the pros and cons? What do you need to pick and choose? And then move to local versus global. So you guys are familiar with this, right? The switches. 1992, my parents came to US for the first time, my mom and dad. My dad is a civil engineer by profession. So we had just bought our house, and we were saying, okay, Dad, come and check the house, look at it, let's go walk. So we did a walk, and then he says, everything looks great, he's an engineer, so he's looking at everything, okay, this, that, construction, all that. He says, everything looks great, but there's something, I think you need to really call your electrical contractor. I said, what happened? He says, look at all your switches, they're all flipped, pulled up, So that was his first experience. He's looking at it and it's like on is off and off is on. And then my mom is worried because now how do we start teaching that? Dad was 70 plus that time. So to get him to switch to our way of, the US way of doing it, right? And then what she does is she takes out her bindi and she puts it on the switch and says, okay, when you feel this thing, then you know it's on. That kind of register, especially when you're in the 90s, and he had a stroke, so it's a little hard for him to walk, independently. So these are the subtleties, like how do you switch and why do you switch? So that was one. And then, so that started my journey of inquiry, like why is globalization important and how do you do it? Coming back to Singapore Airlines. My leg from San Francisco to, I think it was Singapore, Hong Kong, you have a layover. So you get your snackies and apple juice and all that, right? So everybody has seen that, almonds and cashews and peanuts. Then what happens? Then I come, Singapore to India, Singapore to Bangalore. I'm so happy when I see this because I'm craving for something spicy and crunchy, and this is close to home. And they know that, right? They know who you are, they know what you want, and right there they serve it to you. So this is how our global experience should be. Like out of the I would have, okay, again a pack of peanuts, salted, and then this comes up. Like, yes, that's what we need. So design, experiences. Start thinking like that. Like if I'm a user from a different country, how do I give them the extra something which they'll never forget? And then moving on to our globalization and I-18N, L-to-N. So I don't know how many of you have been exposed to this. So it's a mouthful, right? 18 letters between I and N. That's why it's called I-18N. And L-to-N, 10 letters, and G-11N. So within design, what happens is within experience design, you talk about globalization and internationalization and localization. So we encompass G11N by bringing I18N and L10N together. So what are these? Globalization is a huge circle. It encompasses everything. It gets the product or service or website to be globally ready to launch from business point of view, support, care, marketing, you have compliance, and then you have your legal fulfillment, sales, everybody laying the line, moving in there. And then within that, this product could be product or service or any other feature, anything like that. Within product, you have two things, L10N and I18N. So for internationalization, what you have to think about is it's a framework. Framework to get the global readiness in place. So if I'm a website, I'll have strings identified for global readiness, and you would have called out what are the certain nuances like address fields, dates, first and last names, how you place that, and then in US you have social, then you have PAN, So things like that, you call this out and it is ready for global rollout. So the framework is laid out, so the foundation is there. And then what happens within localization, you start looking at it, the look and feel, the interaction, the colors, the images. You have done an audit and you're identifying how do I localize it to the locale. So it's pretty much, it's getting the global readiness in place, that's your laying the land, and then you have adapting the website. So you have to think here, is the language single byte language, Chinese, Japanese, and others, or is it right to left, Hebrew, Arabic, or is it your Roman? And then you also have to think, what is the market segment, demography, all that. And then you start thinking, from your brand perspective, how are you expanding globally? Is the brand going to be a mother brand, like House of Brands, a very strong brand? With Intuit, what we are doing right now is, we were House of Brands and Branded House, so that dialogue is going on. So we are all different brands, QuickBase, QuickBooks, Quicken, there's so many things going on, and now we bring everything together, Mint and everything. So how do you do that? How do you position yourself in the market? So that conversations happen at business level and also at experience and brand, and then you bring it into globalization. So this ecosystem you see is the user experience design ecosystem, and you have all the different disciplines around it, like 15 disciplines to globalize a website. So now I'm leaning more towards like, how do we do it at PayPal? So having 15 disciplines interact with the global design team. And with each one, you have to do it at different phases. For support and sales, you have to educate them what the new feature was for that particular market. Marketing, you have to pretty much start thinking ahead, plan for a marketing launch. And from brand positioning, we started to think, how are we positioning this particular product and feature? So the marketing and sales would go into the market first before even the product launch. And then from there, the US product managers would start talking with the local product managers, if they were in the local market, or they would go and start studying. And then we'd have researchers in the market looking at what are the needs, and then coming back with requirements. And we did have designers at different locales. That was a big plus. So depending on the maturity of your design organization, you would either have designers sitting with you in one location and being fed information from different locale to design to that, which is not optimal, but then you have to look at cost and time. But the other aspect is where you have designers sitting with the product managers and the marketers, as well as researchers looking at the segment. So any questions on that? Anything here on the ecosystem? Looks okay? So the evaluation, obviously it would be looking at if it's a website experience, are there only specific pages which you need to globalize? Or is it the whole site, which is like each individual site gets the localization from A to Z, all pages, all images, everything. So it looks as if somebody has spent a lot of effort, and it does show on the experience. But it has to have a lot of investment. Business is keen on growing in certain area. For example, Japan was is still a hard market for PayPal to crack, because one is the local culture, market, business model they have. And so what they did is initially they did with the light localization. So they pretty much did the medium effort. So key pages, like you have your pricing page, your product overview page, you have your home pages. So they would pick the key pages and then they would localize that. And the rest of the experience was still US-centric. So for a user, if you're going through the flow, it's kind of choppy. But that's the risk you take, if it's light effort. And then what happened was, with that, we did not have a big impact. And then we came out and we did the whole Japan site launch from scratch. Like, even going to the extent in some countries, other than Japan, we did photo shoots, local photo shoots, so that it was very authentic and real to the users there. And here is an overview of like, this localized sites and the languages. It's pretty much a data dump. This is where when you're globalizing, what you'll have to think about is even at the information architecture level, start thinking and sitting with your dev team. Because it's not just on your wireframes, it has to come live with the development team. So start thinking, especially if it is orientation difference, if it's a right to left language you're designing, as well as it's English, then you have to start thinking like, hey, how does this interaction look? If it is a flow, which is flow for a user flow, like steps 1, 2, 3, 4, left to right, how does that look on when it's switched in orientation? And also the images. So with the images, what you do is you do an inventory, you do an audit, sitting with your marketers and saying, what are the special images which totally have to be localized. There's a general list, flags, currencies, photographs, these things totally pop up. But then you have to go into details on other things which sometimes you kind of slip through. It's languages, and also the credit card images we have to think about, and PayPal because with those payments, like which country's MasterCard is there or not there and stuff like that. There's a deeper audit. And having a research team on ground helps a lot. Where at least regional, if not with the country, at least a regional research team, because they are your eyes and ears of your users. So making sure that we have that. And I spoke about the location of the design team and in market, as well as the last one is time to market. Thinking about time to market. If you have 9 months to launch a site, what is it that you can do to start thinking about the time and effort? So this is an overview of, if that's your why, your IA, and then looking at the skin. So this was PayPal 2011. The visual and the overlay of content and the overall site. So what would happen is, in the whole full process of adaptation, we would include dev team, localization team, user experience, inclusive of IA, content, and design. So design, I'm putting it broadly there, which includes interaction design as well as visual design. And then the cultural adaptation, this is something which we all notice every day. All of you might have seen these images or used these tools. So each country has a unique one. The rightmost, the steel one, I think it's mostly in India, and you get a wooden one too, but the center one is from Mexico, and the rightmost is IKEA. It's like all of us use this tool, but we do prefer certain nuances of it. So being sensitive to that, it's everywhere for us, and so keeping your eyes open, being aware. And then when you're doing your image audit, this is where it becomes very important, having the sensitivity to look at things which can be very, very critical to deliver to a locale-specific experience. And there are a lot of books out there too, which will give you a list, but having that education, being open to it, always helps. And this is an example of banners which we did for language, which was for Hebrew. And not only was the visual switched, but the language, even though it was English, we had to place it in a way that it would work with Hebrew. So a lot of things we had to think about was the arrow placement. And here you see the cards. We did not flip the cards going that way. So do you flip it or you not flip it? And then we did ask the local users too in the market whether it made sense or not. And the bottommost where you see the payment cards, so there we had to be very careful. What was the sequencing of it was very important for them. And stock photography is something a lot of companies have to use because of constraints, budget constraints. So how do you smartly use it and still make it seem authentic? So here the third block, which you see, the door and a parcel at the doorstep, very US-centric, right? Your FedEx person comes, drops it at your doorstep, everything is fine. When we were launching in Turkey, the content writer in Turkey said, nobody does that in Turkey, so don't even use that image. Even though if you change the door, whatever, but what you have to do is, if you look at the rightmost, they have a parcel inside. So the assumption is that the person received it and took it inside. So these conversations have to happen. And on the bottom you can see the third image again, staircase, very US-centric. You have moved the stairs away, we just photoshopped it, it was an easy fix. But those subtleties help. And also people pictures. Whenever you have people, make sure you figure out who the audiences are. And mix the genders, making sure there's a good gender mix and the segment is correct. Small things in the left picture where the guy is wearing a jacket, he's not wearing a jacket, tie and stuff, and here you have a dress shirt. So people said, hey, nobody wears that in a warehouse. So we had to make sure that Israel, even though it was a stock image, we needed to make sure it was something very appropriate. And at the bottom for China and Taiwan, subtleties in makeup. China, heavier makeup, bolder. And you see in Taiwan, it's lighter, and the way the hairstyle is. For us, sitting in the US, looking at it, we thought, oh, they look great. But when you ask the people there, even for us in India, right, they think, oh, this is something Sub-South Indian Madrasi hai. Have you guys heard about that? I'm a South Indian, so I would hear that a lot. So having that thing, like each state is unique, each country is so unique. So be sensitive to that. And this is a quick quiz. I don't know if anybody's up and alive and awake. Can you guys guess what is the difference? So subtleties like that, the cuff embroidery, yes. So it's just Photoshop, but it made a big difference. And this is something I wanted to just share. I know it's time out. Some brand mood boards we did. If you have a brand team working with you, make sure you totally talk to them, work with them. Have a master brand, like a mood board, but then what you can do is you can show subtleties for each region. So we did that with currency, with palette, with images, what really drives. So what I had to do is I had to work with my designer in Japan, designer in India. I said, guys, this is the template, go fill it up, and we started using that as a reference for any new sites or any new page launch. So with that, thank you so much. And if you guys have any questions, let me know. So one thing, do not forget, switching is important, right? The right switch is important, having switch is important, and being sensitive is very important.
Thank you.
Yeah, thank you.
So the after our user experience classes, it was very add-on kind of thing.
Okay.
So
It's good to have them reinforce everything.
That's good, because I didn't know what he's taught you guys. I'm hoping there was good overlap there.
right.
Great.
So now I'll call Prashant, my God, who will handle the Q&A and the certificates.
Okay.
So first what we'll do is we'll start with the Q&A round, and then we'll just open it for a few of our classmates to first ask questions, and then we'll open it for the other people to just ask questions, and they will answer questions. So with this, so ICTM already is happening, and then out of that few people are giving exam to get certified as a product manager. So I'll just call a few people to come here on the stage and get the certificates. Mr. Manda. Next, Amit. Bharat. So one thing what I observe is that we have learned from today's session is that as a user, even we like the delightful things, right? And I request even, I think everyone understand that as either product managers or a creative designer guys, or as a business people or IT managers, make sure that whatever you design from now onwards, it has to be delightful. Otherwise, don't accept it as a product manager. So with this, I'll just leave it stage open for the Q&A round with Anjali.
Hi Anjali, I'm Manish. It was a very delightful talk. So one question which I have is, see, today there are a lot of platforms which are emerging, which are used by global audience at the same time. Take for example Facebook. An Indian uses that platform to interact with the American part. So both sides are actually interacting on the same platform. So for such platforms, how do we go about localizing and creating, because everybody is on the same platform at the same time?
Great question. So I think we had some conversation when I was waiting. So younger companies like Facebook, Twitter, these guys, Nest, they have the advantage of building earlier on a solid platform base. So they would have a core component library which would work for global audience. So if you see Facebook, there's pretty much everything is standardized. And the nuances of global aspects is not brought in except for the language for Facebook. So what you have to think about is having a good platform where your component library is strong enough to pull the right information for each country. So technology plays a very key role. For Intuit, what we are still struggling is we have spaghetti code, and I was telling them our search field, it feeds data from about 6 other data centers too. So we don't even have a global search. So that's where having a good technology, a platform, infrastructure in place, data infrastructure in place, helps us to think about globalization and to scale it easily. And having Facebook, pretty much it's like only language I can see, and I haven't seen anything in Hebrew. I will check, maybe I'll check that. But other than that, it's keeping it ready. The framework has to be there. That's a good one.
Hi, Anjali Kriti here. I'm a product manager and I had a question. So if you have to put a feature out there to a global audience, there are companies who do not want to make their feature public. So how do you do a user testing on a feature that has to go on a global audience but still keep it secret? What would you suggest? Especially for a company that might have limited budget.
Sure. So, the ideal way would be having a user researcher sit with you with the market. That's not possible if I'm hearing it right. So there's something called usertesting.com. There's a website. So you can, pretty much give your parameters, the outline, like what you're testing, who you're testing for, and all that. And then you can gather feedback. So that's one of the methods we also use at Intuit. A lot of big companies do that because you have to balance it out. Like, hey, do we do A/B testing? Before even you go A/B testing, you need to at least have a gut check that these could be the possibilities for the feature you want to test. Okay?
Hey, Rajesh. So this design is one aspect where a lot of things are very contextual. Right now, when you create a global team, there are going to be localized researchers sitting there asking for context-specific requirements. Now, as much as possible, they are going to try pulling the requirements localized right now. So, sitting in the headquarters, managing the global team, how do you manage this? Like, what is right and what is not? Because he's saying, that is the thing that works in my market. And now you have to make a call based on, maybe based on investment or whatever it is, you have to make a call. Either you should trust and invest on whatever he's asking for, or you should tell him, we compromise on this. So how do you go about handling that?
Yeah, that happens pretty much every day when you're working with a global team. So it's a very good question there. So how do you prioritize? That becomes very critical. So, for example, I'll give you two pages on your website. One is homepage, another one is help center. Okay? You have the market is saying that you have to localize both of them because it's very important, and both of them have images and content. So, from business point of view, we can only do one, which is the homepage or the help center. So then we negotiate and make a call. Like from brand perspective, which has high impact. The homepage, the front door. And for the help center, then you deprioritize that and say, okay, it's the next batch you do it, but the content is still specific to the market. So the images, then you make it pretty neutral images. Sometimes you get that too. It's like region, if you go with region, then you can kind of balance it out because you do not need country specific, you can regionalize the images. So it's pretty much a business call and also high impact. Like where is the user volume? Where is the customer coming more? The front door, or what is the entry point? Where are the chances of majority of drop-offs? So you start evaluating, and to prevent that, you start prioritizing.
Hi Anjali, this is Sushma here, I work for Cisco Systems, and I'm an EMBA grad student. I have a question. In today's world, we have same UI which should work seamlessly on multiple devices, telephones, tabs, and PCs with the same user experience. So with the different device capabilities, screen sizes, providing the same user experience is a challenge. So how the designers' approach would be to take care of this?
So something called mobile first, right? And also responsive. So that would be the approach, and this is not as an afterthought. It is when you are sitting with your product managers as designers, you're evaluating like on a website you can put a lot more. On a small screen you have to be laser focused. What is the primary action the user is going to take and design for that. So what I would recommend is when you are in the concept phase, make sure that whoever is writing the requirements understands it's going to scale. And then once it scales across devices, platforms, then globalization is not a challenge. I think it's initial design and concept where you have to start thinking, do I do it? Because majority of the places who were like, 13, 15 years back, responsive, mobile first was not around. And you have Facebook, Twitter, all these guys were like, they're throwing things out which is faster because they're thinking that way. So we need to start thinking that way, especially for companies who are still catching on.
Hi Anjali, this is Shubhranshu. I'm a product manager. My question is, whatever you have described so far, it's a beautiful session, but you have described from a globalized framework to internationalization and localization. But if there is a product, say suppose it's a localized product and then they want to get it reversed to a globalized way, how the design will impact?
Okay, so let me rephrase that and then tell me if I'm understanding it correctly. So in India, you would design a product which would eventually get globalized to all the markets, correct?
Correct.
Okay. So what you have to do is, yes, that is possible, but this is where it becomes very important that you have to wear the global lenses. You have to think about scalability, even if you are designing for India market. So if the product is specific for India market, maybe there are certain features which you can scale, maybe not all. So you have to start evaluating that. And designing is never in silos. You have to think about users who will be global users, right? Even though you're designing for India market, there will be Indian users who will be residing in other countries. So thinking not as an afterthought, even mobile, across platform, even global. So global, mobile, always should be something you start off with as a basic, like, my 101 for starting a design approach. So it can be done, it has been done, at PayPal we had done it, but what you have to do is you have to think, like, what are the things which are common to everybody and what is unique to that market. So whatever was common we fed to the other countries and they localized it, but what was unique to the market we retained.
Yeah, with this, probably with this last two questions. Yeah.
Okay. I'm an IT consultant. I just want to ask you, how do you test the success of your design? That is to say, what are the specific methods or techniques that you use? That is, before you roll it into production, you would like to show it to some people representing that particular part of the world or that segment of industry. And you would like to minimize on the bad experiences. So what specific methods do you use? Like one thing is possibly you can give to survey companies, market research companies. They will give you feedback from some of the users. Are there any other methods? And how much does it cost? What fraction of the total development time does testing take?
So to the latter part of the dollar amount, I do not have that information. I can answer former. So how do we test it? One, you mentioned about market research, and then we also do live testing. You can do live testing, roll out A/B testing. A, B, or C. C would be the control, which is current, and then you have variables of A and B. And how do you even come to A and B? You know, that would be another thing, right? You're designing about 10, there may be 10, out of 10, there may be 6, which are like, hey, these make sense. So this is where you have experienced people working with you who can say, hey, this has worked in the past, and then I would highly recommend that you do the A/B testing, because that is your live audience. Clicking on the pages, and you would have certain metrics earlier on, like what are the failures which you are trying to switch from becoming failures for the users, like where are they dropping off, where are they clicking a lot more, and are they getting what they're clicking for. So looking at, there's a lot of the heat mapping, eye tracking, so there are all these methodologies also which you can apply, and then start tweaking the experience. So a design is never complete, right? It's always evolving. So keeping that track and keeping an eye, like 2 months, every 2 months, seeing what can you do, what to improve, that would be another way of approach.
And also the amount of effort, the percentage.
For testing, if it is, I'm just throwing this out there, I don't have exact data, but what we do is, I just went through a homepage redesign we're doing. So if it is a 3-month cycle, we at least keep 3 to 4 weeks for testing and iterating in the end before we push it out. So.
Thank you.
Yeah, thanks. Just considering the time factor, we have again the event where we can have snacks and ask questions. So let's continue over there. With this, I would invite Professor Pinkesh to give a token of appreciation.
Thanks a lot.
Well, thank you so much.
We had a meet, this is about 4 months ago when we had dinner in San Francisco, and we're trying to convince her to actually do this session. So it took about 4 months.
Yeah.
Here we are, and hopefully the next time we actually will have her as a faculty to teach here. So that should not take 4 months. Hopefully we'll like to.
You're a very engaged student body. Yes.
Appreciate you coming all the way here.
Absolutely.
My pleasure. Professor Satish. So now we have a snacks outside, and at the same time, just to make it delightful, have a lot of questions, whatever you have, just ask. A lot of folks are there. If you have any question related to EMBA or any specific about IPL, feel free to interact. Thank you.
Thank you guys.
Thank you.